Hello and welcome back to Random Vids. So as the title says, we are going to be talking more about SpongeBob, one of my favorite cartoons, and just one that I really like. So I decided to make it a little interesting today. We talked about the worst episodes in a lot of the seasons, and we even talked about my least favorite episode per season. One of my fellow subscribers, I think you know him as Connor O'Brown. Shout out to him, by the way. I will link his channel down in the description. But anyway, when I told everyone the worst episodes of seasons 1 through 12, he told me his as well. And I felt like it would be kind of a neat idea for me to talk about his least favorite episodes of SpongeBob. Do I agree with them? Do I not? Like, I haven't really talked about any of these episodes that he that he doesn't like. So, okay. I thought this would be a fun idea to talk about some episodes I haven't talked about before and to see what episodes he doesn't like and which ones I can agree with. I will also be ranking them on 1 star to be 1 star being bad obviously and 10 stars being really good. So, let's do that. And as we talk about his worst episodes, and I'll be seeing if I like them or not too. So I hope you all enjoy this random SpongeBob video. So let's get into season 1, and that episode is I Was a Teenage Gary. Okay, I can understand why a lot of people don't like this episode. It's a very strange one, and even the title card alone, I Was a Teenage Gary, is just very off and odd. Where did teenage come from? Is it supposed to reference SpongeBob? If it is, SpongeBob is most likely an adult, not a teenager. Is Gary the teenager? I don't understand where the word teenage comes from. So the title card alone already messes with my brain. It's pretty simple. SpongeBob goes away for the weekend and Squidward takes care of Gary. Except Squidward has forgotten about Gary. So by the time SpongeBob comes back, Gary is looking very sick, I guess. And they call a doctor who gives them a snail plaza, but Gary was just thirsty. Squidward accidentally injects SpongeBob with the snail plasma, but was told that he will be fine. But then he starts transforming into a snail, and then torments Squidward. And then eventually Squidward gets shot with this snail plasma, and now he's a snail. But then the episode ends with the 3 snails just singing to the moon, and Patrick hits Squidward the boot because, why not? More Squidward torture, the better. I completely agree with a lot of people who hate this episode. It's just such a strange season 1 episode. And yes, there is a lot of Squidward torture in it, and it gets very boring at times. In my opinion, I still think episodes like The Paper and Sandy's Rocket are worse. But, yeah, this episode is definitely bad. I don't know. I just don't really have words for this episode. It's just so strange. Such a strange episode. And it can be kind of horrifying, too. Especially the SpongeBob transform into a snail scene. That was very odd. Also, the doctor is very odd, too. He's the doctor. He should be the one giving Gary the snail plasma. Not Squidward and SpongeBob. This is a really odd thing. It's weird how they change characters to fit into the story rather than change the story to fit into the characters. I don't like when shows do that. So although it ain't my least favorite from season 1, it's definitely on the worser side. I'd give this one probably about, I don't know. Probably like a 2.5 out of 10, maybe a 3, just because it ain't the worst thing I've ever seen. Like, I'd take this any day over something like Yours, Mine, and Mine. But, yeah, it's definitely one of the weaker Season 1 episodes. I think I'll stick with a 3 out of 10. Now let's move on to Season 2, which is Squids Day Off. Aw, man, I love this episode, honestly. Anyway, it's simple. Mr. Krabs has an injury, and Squidward is now in charge. And so he lets SpongeBob do everything while Squidward, quote-unquote, runs errands. And of course, that's just Squidward going home and taking the day off, as the title says. Meanwhile, he keeps having these visions of what SpongeBob would do to the Krusty Krab, whether that's be stupid or big stuff like catching the Krusty Krab literally on fire. And I love the scene where Squidward just randomly has a fire extinguisher and just sprays it all through the Krusty Krab. Then we get to see Squidward and SpongeBob with beards and mustaches. Squidward starts slowly descending into madness, though, and he refuses to leave his house because he just knows if he goes back to the Krusty Krab, it's going to look exactly the same as when he left it. But he keeps having these visions of SpongeBob. SpongeBob's in his house, running outside, even in the bathtub with him. And then Squidward snaps. And he runs all the way back to the Krusty Krab just to hear SpongeBob say, "Have you finished those errands?" And Squidward says, "Yes, I have finished those errands." And heck, SpongeBob was even nice and gave Squidward pants at the end. Yes, obviously it's your opinion, which is fine, but I don't know. I love Squids Day Off. I find it one of my favorite episodes from Season 2. It's just one of those classic, iconic Season 2 episodes, I think. And, I don't know, maybe there is some Squidward torture in there, but it personally don't bother me. Maybe you could tell me down in the comments why Squids Day Off ain't your favorite. Because, honestly, I really like it. But yeah, like I said, that's fine. In my opinion, it's a good episode of Season 2. And I'd probably give it an 8 out of 10. Now let's move on to Season 3, which is Party Pooper Pants. So this is the one and only episode that we actually both agree is the worst episode from Season 3. And I mean, it kind of is. Season 3 is full of, and I'm not saying they're all good, but there was a lot of iconic good episodes in Season 3. Party Pooper Pants, I feel like it's something everyone can agree on. It's kind of like episodes like I Was a Teenage Gary or I'm With Stupid. It's just that episode that just is the worst of the season. And I've already talked about it before when I talked about the worst Season 3 2-in-1 episodes, as well as talking about my opinions on the worst episodes per season. So actually, we can just move right on. But yeah, Party Pooper Pants definitely is a 1 out of 10. Bad episode. SquidBob Tentacle Pants. I feel like this episode is a really mixed bag. Some people really love this episode, other people just can't stand it. I feel myself more neutralized on this episode. Anyway, Sandy has a new invention that SpongeBob wants to try out. But SpongeBob accidentally ended up inside of Squidward? Or more of Squidward's hand ended up inside of SpongeBob's mouth. Yeah. So they both accidentally get morphed together, and now Sandy has created SquidBob Tentacle Pants. I remember watching this this episode as a really young kid, and I always thought it was a really unique episode, which it is. So now we get to see life of Squidward and SpongeBob together. Like, for example, they both of them working at the Krusty Krab and Squidward's clarinet recital. And for some reason, the people don't mind seeing Squidward and SpongeBob together like that? Okay. But then when Sandy comes with the antidote, apparently them separated is bad now? What? And then, of course, the infinite ending with everyone morphed together, which was definitely a very odd ending, which kind of does put down this episode for me. And although it is a very odd episode, I personally don't mind it that much. It's definitely one of the more neutral episodes of Season 4. And with Season 4 not really being my personal favorite season, it's just okay. I think the whole concert scene was very awkward, and of course the infinite ending scene, boy. And the whole Squidward torture in this episode is annoying too. But it's a lot better in this episode rather than others like, Good Neighbors, coming from literally the same frickin' season. So, yeah, maybe a little bit of Squidward torture thrown in there too, but it's done a little better in my opinion. And while it is very odd seeing Squidward and SpongeBob morph together, it was kind of interesting seeing both of them having to work together. Sort of. Like I said, I don't really know how I feel about this episode. So I'm going to give it a 5 out of 10. It's like neutral zone for me. Now let's move on to Season 5, which is Henge. Oh boy, another very odd episode from Season 5. But season 5 easily was one of the worst seasons. Not the worst. It was like the third worst in my opinion. And even though this episode is very odd and all, I don't know. I don't really know. This is a very odd story, too. Basically, it's windy, so the wind is blowing through SpongeBob's holes and makes this actually kind of catchy music that the jellyfish even like. But that's the thing, the jellyfish are freaking annoying in this episode. All SpongeBob is trying to do is get to work, and these dumb jellyfish are just there stopping him. It's one thing in something like Jellyfish Jam from season 1. That episode is a classic, and it's one of my favorites. But Spongehenge, it comes from season 5, and the jellyfish are just so annoying. Although the music that does play is catchy and all, man, the jellyfish are annoying, and it causes SpongeBob to run into a cave. And then he creates these rock SpongeBobs. He does a bunch of different sizes, and then he puts them all together, and it creates noise, and the jellyfish like them? Okay. Like SquidBob Tentacle Pants, it's just another one of those really odd episodes that I can't really put my finger on if I love it or hate it. So I'm just going to put it, yet again, right in the middle, at a 5 out of 10, like SquidBob Tentacle Pants. I think Spongehenge is better, though, just because we don't have that Squidward torture in it, and I find it a little more interesting. But yeah, it's definitely one of the more odder episodes of Season 5. Now let's move on to Season 6, which is The Splinter. Woo, oh boy, this one is a rough one. So, SpongeBob is working. And guess what happens? SpongeBob gets a splinter. Okay? And of course, instead of asking for help for someone who would be a lot better at the job like Sandy or Mr. Krabs, guess who SpongeBob asks help for him? So, yeah, Patrick. And because this is the dreaded Season 6, Patrick is not how he used to be. Remember back in the episode Suds, when Patrick was the doctor? There, even if the things weren't working, at least they were funny. And it sort of seemed like he was trying to help. In the Splinter, he does whatever he wants, and if SpongeBob complains, then he will just leave SpongeBob as is and not even help, just because he wants to do things his way. I swear, Patrick has gone from probably my favorite character of the show in the original seasons, to easily one of the worst characters of SpongeBob in mid-seasons like this. The Splinter is no exception. Even if they left out the whole Patrick scene, this episode would still be bad, but not quite as bad. But because they had to have that terrible Patrick scene, that just makes it all the worse. He does weird things, and then gets mad at SpongeBob, and then he hammers the Splinter down in more and infects it with trash. What a nice best friend, SpongeBob. Like I said before, at least in Suds, it seemed like he was trying to help, and even would allow SpongeBob to tell him what he needs to do. The Splinter, though, Patrick does what he wants to do, and if SpongeBob doesn't like it, well, tough. I don't know, maybe Patrick is the worst character. Well, never mind. I still think Gary's worse. But, good lord, Patrick is annoying in this episode, and that alone makes this episode one of the worst. And then towards the end, the whole infection is just so big and swollen, and it's just so disgusting to see. Why does SpongeBob think visually doing... Not just the Splinter, but episodes where they rip their skin apart, or... what is so funny about that? I don't understand. Why do you think that is considered funny or entertaining? But whatever, this is Season 6, so it's normal for Season 6 to have stuff like this. And I swear, the only good character in this episode is Mr. Krabs, because he actually helps out SpongeBob by getting rid of the Splinter, which is surprisingly strange for Mr. Krabs to be this nice, but okay. And although this episode is bad, I think Choir Boys might be a little worse, plus a lot of the other Squidward torture we got in this episode. At least this episode we didn't get Squidward torture, which was my main gripe about Season 6. Good frickin' lord. And yes, the Splinter is definitely bad. Party Pooper Pants is a good example of a bad classic episode. The Splinter is a good example of a bad mid-season episode. It easily gets a 1 out of 10, and if I could, it would be a 0 out of 10. I'm done with this train wreck. Let's move on to Season 7, which hopefully the worst episode ain't as bad here. One Course Meal. Oh boy, this episode is infinitely known as the worst SpongeBob episode of all time, and I can completely see why. Usually when they do Plankton torture episodes, I usually don't mind it. Plankton either usually deserves it, or it isn't a bad enough torture for me to be like, ugh. But One Course Meal is just so annoying. And by that I mean like, it flips any of those on its head and says, oh, you think we could be nice? You think we're going to do good episodes? Nah, we're going to have One Course Meal, and then you'll be thinking of bad episodes. So Mr. Krabs finds out that Plankton is scared of his daughter Pearl. So because Mr. Krabs was already so nice, he ends up dressing up as Pearl to scare the living daylights out of Plankton. So then Plankton starts descending into madness and even depression, and ends up having dreams about Pearl eating him. Okay. And then the next day, Plankton goes from depression to suicide. Wow, what an episode. At least SpongeBob was there to help. So at least we didn't get a stupid "Are you happy now?" where the whole episode is depression and suicide. It was just a one little quote-unquote joke, which is not even a word to call that. So he tells Plankton Mr. Krabs' fear, and Plankton takes that as an advantage, and apparently then when he ends up doing it, SpongeBob's all for Mr. Krabs again and scares Plankton away. What? Didn't you just try to help Plankton out and now you're back to Mr. Krabs? Although the whole thing with Mr. Krabs being scared of mimes is super hilarious, that doesn't save this episode at all. While I do think episodes like Stuck in the Ringer and Yours, Mine, and Mine are definitely a lot worse than this episode, I can easily see why anyone would hate this episode and consider it the worst of the whole series. I mean, just look at it. Plankton gets tortured for no reason because he exists. Wow. Even in frickin' Are You Happy Now? At least Squidward is sort of getting help. Plankton is just not. Until SpongeBob, of course, but that wasn't until Plankton got descended into depression and, ugh, I don't even like saying that S word. Although, back in the day when I talked about the worst seasons, 7, 8, and 9 episodes, this episode was an honorable mention. But if I would have done that around now, it would definitely make the worst list of yeah. It's just another one of those dumb, poorly written Season 7 mid-SpongeBob episodes. I do not like how SpongeBob fell so much. One Course Meal is a train wreck of an episode, and it is not the worst of Season 7, but definitely one of the worst episodes of Season 7, for sure. Another 1 out of 10 episode that I would have easily put in a 0 out of 10 if I could. Alright, let's move on to a better season, Season 8. Let's get out of this mid-SpongeBob, because I'm tired of this. Let's move on to Season 8, which is Face Freeze. Oh boy, this episode. So, it's fairly simple. And of course, it's a predictable mess too. SpongeBob and Patrick make faces. Mr. Krabs tells them not to. SpongeBob and Patrick disobey. SpongeBob and Patrick have face freeze. Sandy tries to help. Sandy doesn't help that much. Mr. Krabs notices that they have face freeze. Mr. Krabs furious. Mr. Krabs has face freeze. Squidward thinks it's funny. Now Squidward has face freeze. Now they all have face freeze, and what a good ending to a pretty bad episode. Now, I would say this episode definitely ain't as bad as One Course Meal or the Splinter, but it's definitely one of the weaker ones of Season 8. I'd take this over Squidward torture or Patrick being a jerk, but yeah, like I said, it's definitely one of the weaker Season 8 episodes. Also, the fact that a lot of the faces SpongeBob and Patrick make can be really creepy, especially to the younger kids. While me being literally going to be 19 soon, episodes like this don't scare me, but for younger kids, I could definitely see them being scared of something like this. Overall, it's just a boring episode of Season 8, in my opinion. And yes, all the faces SpongeBob and Patrick made get very old, and the designs are very weird. I'd give this episode probably like a 1.5 out of 8, maybe, or 10, maybe a 2 out of 10, just because I don't find it as bad as some of the others, but it definitely is up there as one of the worst runs from Season 8. I think it's going to be a 2 out of 10 just because it ain't as bad as One Course Meal the Splinter or Party Pooper Pants, in my opinion. But don't get me wrong, it's definitely a bad episode. Now let's move on to Season 9, which is SpongeBob, You're Fired. Yeah, boy. Season 9 is the season I could consider modern SpongeBob. Yeah, it definitely does have problems that mid-seasons had, but at least we're getting better. Season 9 was actually a pretty good season, but yeah, I don't know about some of these episodes here. And while back in the day I somehow liked this episode, SpongeBob You're Fired, probably just because I found it cool seeing SpongeBob working at all these different chains. And I mean, I will admit, it is kind of cool seeing SpongeBob working outside the Krusty Krab at all these different unique places and all, but they're only for like a split second and then he's fired again. And basically everyone, well, all the staff owners of all those restaurants are really rude, and they don't even give any of SpongeBob's patty things a chance. This is a big special here, so okay, SpongeBob gets fired. SpongeBob cries for like 6 minutes. SpongeBob gets kicked out of Krusty Krab. SpongeBob falls into depression. Of course. Patrick tries to help. Patrick doesn't help. Sandy helps instead. SpongeBob gets fired from 4 more jobs. Now all of a sudden, everyone wants SpongeBob back. And now this big Krabby Patty guy, whatever, is going to take SpongeBob back. And it's kind of silly seeing that it's Squidward and that he begs for SpongeBob to come back, which is kind of silly. But we've seen many times where SpongeBob has either been fired or let go, and they were just a lot better. Like, for example, in Season 1's Pickles, where SpongeBob takes a few days off and Squidward tries to man the grill and doesn't work. Everyone is happy that SpongeBob is back, and it just feels a lot better than something like this. And yeah, the episode is kind of slow going and filler and sandbagging as well. I just feel like it never ends. And like I said, a lot of the store owners are very obnoxious too. Also, SpongeBob is very out of character here too. You know, SpongeBob has stuff he likes outside of cooking at the Krusty Krab. He likes jellyfishing, he likes blowing bubbles. I mean, he has so many things he likes to do. But apparently now he's just only a fry cook, which a lot of people could say is another thing wrong with modern SpongeBob. They focus way too much on the Krusty Krab, which I can sort of see, but at the same time, it doesn't bother me. My main gripe with this episode, though, is just how SpongeBob feels like he's nothing without working at the Krusty Krab, which is very out of character, seeing SpongeBob be the depressed one now. First Squidward, then Plankton, and now SpongeBob. Well, sorry. Plankton, then Squidward, then SpongeBob. At least he doesn't really get suicidal like those two do, but ay, come on. Don't be talking about those subjects. It's just so dumb, and I hate seeing how SpongeBob's life is meaningless without working at the Krusty Krab thing. Bruh. Literally, you have so much stuff you love to do. Like, this one is a train wreck. Every time I see this episode, the worse it gets, literally. It's definitely, yet again, another one of the weaker Season 9 episodes. Not the worst. I'd still probably put this at like a 2 out of 10. But, Now let's move on to Season 10, which is The Incredible Shrinking Sponge. Aw, man, I like a lot of the shrinking episodes. The Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy one from Season 3 was pretty good. Squidtastic Voyage was really good from Season 4. The only one that I didn't like was the one from Season 6 where Squidward grows and they use him. The Incredible Shrinking Sponge, on the other hand, kind of brings that shrinking thing back. And not gonna lie, I find it fun watching SpongeBob run around as his little version. The Krusty Krab kitchen is a very unique place with SpongeBob being small. And I like the way I guess the way he gets small is kind of random, but okay. But I like the things they do with him. Like, for example, one second he's going to be skating on his grill, the next second he's going to be underneath it helping a sea urchin out, then he'll be up at the soda machines, and they just do such a good job of doing a bunch of different things with this episode. And I love the scenes in the chum bucket too, where he's literally like almost the same size as Plankton. And the part with the kids is funny too, where they think he's an action figure, and then how SpongeBob is a personal hygiene service now. Okay. And I like the ending of this episode too, where SpongeBob gets big, really big. Literally, he then has to go to the fire department. I like how he's just holding Squidward and Mr. Krabs in his hands as well. It's just a walking Krusty Krab basically at this point. Kind of like Squids Day Off. I actually really like this episode, and I consider it one of the better ones of Season 10. Not that there was really any bad episodes of Season 10 to begin, so okay. I really like The Incredible Shrinking Sponge, and I'm curious to hear what are your thoughts on it. Why is this one your favorite? I'm a little curious. Which is, obviously, it's alright. Everyone has their own opinions, but I honestly, in my opinion, I really like this episode. I'd give it like a maybe 8 or 9 out of 10. Now let's move on to Season 11, which is Ink Lemonade. Yeah, this is widely known as one of the worst modern SpongeBob episodes, and I mean, I don't blame you. It is definitely a return to a mid-SpongeBob. It looks like it could have easily been in a Season 6 or 7 episode, and no one would ever blink an eye. One of the things that I hate the most about SpongeBob is Squidward torture. I don't know why they think it's so funny that he should be tortured in these episodes. We have a lot of good Squidward episodes, and then we have bad ones. And it looks like Ink Lemonade is one of the bad ones. Patrick is selling black lemonade, lemonade, and it's just water at first or something, and then he gets a really ugly lemon from Squidward and puts a band-aid on it from the inside of his armpit. Ugh! Although Patrick as a character has improved a bit since mid-season, this is like the worst mid-Patrick or modern Patrick you can get, I think. Yeah, I don't know. It's gross. But then by accident, SpongeBob scares Squidward, and now he sprays lemonade into the jar. And now Patrick is trying to sell this to people because black lemonade apparently is good? I don't think it looks good. So then Patrick scares Squidward again by ripping his skin up. Remember how I was talking about the Splinter and how the visual effects are annoying? I'm glad we've gotten a lot less of those in modern seasons. Unfortunately, episodes like this bring that back. Like I said, this could be easily mistaken in a Season 6 or 7 season. And guess what? And then we get a spider in Squidward's house. And then a whole frickin' haunted house. Because, why not? And then Squidward realizes that they're actually selling that stuff to people, which we're as confused as he is. So he asks people if they want them straight from the source, which of course they all say yes. But of course Squidward can't do it until this one guy scares him. Then he sprues black ink all over everybody, which is what they all deserve after waiting in line for this disgusting treat. And I think the episode would have been good leaving off there, and it was nice hearing SpongeBob and Patrick saying they're done with the lemonade business and on to the cookie business. Oh, but apparently it's made of spider eggs, which come out of Squidward's mouth, and he sprays the ink black, and which ends the episode. I could easily see why a lot of people would hate this episode and even consider it the worst of all SpongeBob. But at the same time, after watching it the first time, I thought I was going to hate it a lot more than I did. Obviously, this episode has Squidward torture in it, and it's definitely one of the worst episodes from Season 11. But at the same time, I found episodes like Choir Boys or Cephalopod Lodge, for an example, from Season 6, or even Smooth Jazz at Bikini Bottom in Season 8, a lot worse than this episode, mainly just because the Squidward torture was just so horrendous. And yes, it is bad in this episode, but it ain't quite as bad, I don't think. And yes, it's definitely Squidward torture, as I said. I just don't think it's as bad as some of those other Squidward torture episodes. Which, yes, it's definitely the most Squidward torture in Season 11, but I've seen worse. Don't get me wrong, this episode is definitely bad, but it's not, like, the worst. I don't even think it's the worst of Season 11, I don't think. And it's not that seeing the inside of Patrick's armpit or his skin ripped up wasn't annoying, but like, it just, I don't know. It was bad, for sure, but even stuff like cuddly hugs I consider even worse than Ink Lemonade, and that's saying a lot. So yeah, Ink Lemonade is definitely a bad episode, but not the worst. I'd give it like a 1 out of 10, maybe a 1.5 out of 10. It's gross. It's more gross and disgusting than anything, in my opinion. And Patrick is just annoying in this episode. 1 out of 10 for me, I guess. Maybe 1.5. Now let's move on to Season 12, which is Pineapple RV. Oh boy. So, Squidward wants to see this, I forget what it's called, basically a flower. But guess who destroys his car? Or whatever, the thing he was gonna take. Yes, SpongeBob and Patrick, because, they always have to do that. However, they feel sorry and they let Squidward still go, but SpongeBob turned his house into a weird RV type thing. And now they're okay. Also, apparently Gary's the one who gets to drive. Okay. And they finally do get to the area where the flower will be. Squidward wants to see it. SpongeBob and Patrick dug it up for him for some reason, but it dies, and then everyone gets mad at Squidward and beats him up, I think. But basically, it's another one of those dumb. They get mad at him for something SpongeBob and Patrick did. Ah, I love those episodes. So Squidward tries to leave without SpongeBob and Patrick, and it sort of works, except for the fact that he can't do that, which was probably the best thing about this episode, seeing Squidward wanting to get away from them, but he just can't do it. So he goes back and he picks them up and takes them back. And lo and behold, SpongeBob and Patrick actually ended up getting the flower, apparently, to live. And now it's all Squidward's, okay? I've only seen this episode like 3 times, so I haven't seen it enough to really remember the full story. I think it's another one like Ink Lemonade, where it isn't the worst Squidward torture I've ever seen. There's definitely Squidward torture, but it ain't the worst Squidward torture. And I like seeing the pineapple as a RV as well. It's kind of interesting. Now, yes, SpongeBob and Patrick are annoying as heck in this episode, and it is definitely a more weaker Season 12 episode. But yet again, it's not one that I necessarily hate, but it's definitely a bad one, but not one that I hate. And yeah, there is definitely better Squidward, SpongeBob, Patrick episodes, like Squid on a Bus, for an example. Pineapple RV is just, I'd give this one probably like a 3 out of 10. And man, I hope you enjoyed this random video about talking about some SpongeBob episodes. Once again, shout out to Connor Brown for giving me his top 10 least favorite SpongeBob episodes. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.